Overflow, it's October 25th. How are we feeling tonight? I took it off. They asked where my costume is. I can't take myself seriously standing here in a costume all night. Now I get to look at you sit in a costume all night, which I think is pretty awesome. Thank you for dressing up. I think this is so fun. And for all of you that didn't dress up, I'm with you. I'm in plain clothes now. I feel the anxiety that you probably feel of the idea of dressing up with a group this big. I'm really, really glad that you're here tonight. If you're watching online tonight, I'm especially glad that you're linked in with us. There's a lot of exciting things happening in Overflow and are going to continue to happen in Overflow over the next few weeks and the next few months. And I think that we are kind of at that point in the semester where it feels like it's just getting harder. Right? Can anybody agree? I see some heads nodding where it's like classes are getting harder, tests are getting harder, managing your time is getting harder. Think about it this way. After tonight, we have 3 overflows left before you leave to go home on Thanksgiving break. And then after that, we have 2 overflow left for the rest of the year. I mean, it's crazy kind of where we are like in the schedule of 2022, getting ready to be 2023. As Jake and Jenna talked about during the welcome about passion, one thing I just want to share really, really quickly, and I'm kind of saying this partially in this space too, so you can kind of use this as you talk to your parents. $425 is quite a bit of money to anybody, but especially to a college student. So the idea that you would have to pull together $425 to go to Passion with us could seem daunting. And here's what I want you to hear me say. If money is the thing that is going to prevent you from going to Passion, like if you're immediately concerned about that, let our team help you strategize about how you can pull together the money. Because Passion Conference is a really, really fun and helpful and formative experience because of the relationships that you make on the way to and from Passion. A couple things just so we know. If you went to Passion last year, you know that the price was $300. So then you hear us say that it went to $425 and you're probably thinking, what happened? A couple things. One, the Passion ticket is a little bit more this year than it was last year. 2, gas is more expensive, vans are more expensive, food's more expensive, everything is more expensive this year, as well as the hotel. Check this out. Our hotel bill is $24,000. Right. That was on my credit card statement one month. I had to go to our executive pastor and go, we good? So I say all that to say, not to make you feel bad for us, but we are doing it as inexpensively as possible. I have researched and studied and tried to find every place that we can save money. Renting a 15-passenger van is $1,100. And we need 15 of them. Do the math. So there's a lot of math that goes into that. If you need help talking to your parents about that, you can give them my cell phone number. You can come get it tonight. I'd be happy to talk about it. But as far as tonight, we are in week 3 of a series called A Movement Like No Other. It's our final week. We took a break from it last week for Passion to actually be in the room. How was that? I thought it was incredible. How was that? Yeah. That's good. Sean Curran and Melody are such a gift in the way that they lead worship, and Brett is such a humble and special and incredibly wise pastor and leader in our world today. I'm really, really grateful that you got to hear from him. This week we are talking about politics. Someone said, "Oh, yeah, I heard that." I hear it when y'all are on Instagram in the message too, but that's a joke. So the thing about politics that I kind of want you to hear me say before we go any further is the ecclesiology, meaning the way that this generation views the church, the things that we believe to be true about the church matter immensely to me. One of the big reasons that it matters, especially to me right now, is I have a 4-month-old daughter who's either going to attend and grow up in the church or she's not. And I want the church to have their head on straight. I want the church to be moving in a direction where Lennon says, I want to be a part of the church of Jesus. And I think especially when it comes to politics, there's so many different opinions, there's so many different ideas, and I hope tonight to walk a really, really fine line. I don't want to offend anybody. I do not want to make anybody feel unnecessarily uncomfortable, but I do want to lay out a vision for what does it look like to be really, really healthy in our approach politically as Jesus followers. Because where politics are, there is often disagreement and division. And Jesus and the Bible has a lot to say about those two things. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and he was asking me what we were talking about tonight, and I told him, and he said, well, what did you talk about a couple weeks ago? And I told him we talked about church hurt, and then we talked about, your calling as a part of the church, and we told him all the different things we talked about this semester. And he was like, dude, do you prefer to have a lightning rod on everything that you teach about? Do you talk about only controversial stuff? Which kind of made me have this visual of a lightning rod. I asked Jacob on our team earlier, I was like, do you have anything that's really long and obnoxious and looks like a lightning rod? He's like, yeah, I got just the thing for the job. He crushed it, to say the least. So I started thinking about this, and it's when the church, when people like me with a microphone on stand in front of people and start talking about things that are controversial in nature, that are hard to fully understand, it can feel like we are just looking for controversy, or we are just looking to prove someone wrong, or we are just looking to make someone feel uncomfortable. And I can assure you that is not my intention tonight. But the more that I was looking at this pipe today as he had it laid out, when I think about the way that we interact politically, I think this is another really, really perfect example. The people that we disagree with, we want them to be as far away from us as possible, to the point that we construct walls, and sometimes our theology, this is really heavy, sometimes our theology gets to be the thing that is in between us and the people that we disagree with. Maybe it's just simply the person that they voted for, or the thing that they believe about the government, or the thing that they believe about the world at large. We get farther and farther and farther away from them, to the point that when they start getting close to us, don't stand up. We put our guard up, and we're like, no, stay away, because we don't believe the same things, or we don't have the same convictions. And I just can't find that in the Bible. I really can't. I've looked, because this is more comfortable. When I disagree with somebody, it's just kind of like social distancing times 4. It's like, stay away from me at all times. And the point is this could be our approach. This could be our approach as a Jesus follower. This could be our approach as the church. And if I'm not lying to you, it probably would be easier than what I'm going to propose tonight. But I think that the question is, are we going to choose distance and separation? Or are we going to choose the bucket of water that, this is even heavier, that Jesus used to demonstrate what does it look like to interact with people that you disagree with, to interact with people that hurt you. So we have our work cut out for us. There's 35 minutes on the clock. Are you ready? Let's get it. All right, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of Fridays ago, I got up and I knew that we needed to take Lynn to the doctor because it was her 4-month anniversary of being born. And it was like, yeah, that's exciting. She's 4 months old, which is really, I got to spend a good bit of time with her today, and it really, really was special. But anyway, we get up Friday morning, and Maddie said, her 4-month checkup is today. We're going together. It's going to be fun. But I have some things that I could really do for work. Would you mind taking her by yourself? And I was like, oh, I get to be the dad of the year. Yeah, for sure. I don't get to take Lennon many places by myself to go do things together because of kind of the rhythm of our life right now. And I was like, okay, yes, I got it. She said, but Carson, just so you know, this is a really normal checkup. They're just gonna check your vitals. They're gonna ask you a few development questions. It's gonna be good to go. You'll be out of there in 20 minutes. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It's not gonna be hard. I was like, great, I can do that. So I load all of her stuff up. I think I'm like dad of the year because I'm carrying all of her stuff into the doctor. I brought my mask because you have to have that going into the pediatrician. And I didn't wait for them to give me one of the masks. Like I brought my COVID-19 mask. It was like, it has my little, yeah. Anyway, so I was like, I am just killing it right now. We walk past the reception desk, we get into the room, nurse walks in the door, and she says, hey, you guys are here for your 4-month checkup. And I was like, yeah. And she looks at me and she says, is mom coming? And I was so offended. I was like, you don't think I got this? And I proceeded to tell her what was gonna happen because I know everything about a pediatrician's office. I was like, well, it's just a normal checkup. We're not getting any shots today. So, her mom thought that I was qualified. I could handle it. She said, she's getting shots today. And I was like, no. Maddie said she's not getting shots today. She said, well, no, it's a part of the normal kind of procedure. They get boosters today. I was like, okay, cool. She doesn't like shots. And she especially doesn't like to not have mom after shots. All of the shots that she's gotten in her life, she's had mom for. And now there's dad. And I'm like, okay, I got it. Anyway, the point of the story is I got into a place, and what I thought was going to be my reality was definitely not my reality. And I was like, this is not at all, not at all what I signed up for. The point of the story is, if you're here tonight and that's you, and you hear someone on stage talking about politics and you're like, this is not what I signed up for, just trust me that I believe if you lean into this, if you press into this, there is an Egyptian pharaoh dude that just walked into the room. I feel like you win something. But there is something for you. There is something for you tonight. And I hope, because some of you would probably say, you don't really care that much about politics. You don't really have much of a political opinion. Maybe, watching the news or thinking about government is just kind of not on your high list of things to do. I think that would probably be actually a good bit of us. Don't miss what I believe God has for you tonight, all right? So one thing that I want us to, oh gosh, I put that there, that's on me. One thing I want us to know is this. If we are going to make a difference in the world, we must be different. Okay, that seems overly simple, but we seldom apply this reality. If we want to make a difference in the world, it starts with us being different, especially when it comes to those of you that would say that you are a Jesus follower. It requires you to be different. It causes you to navigate disagreement and tension differently. And I think that this is something that we can very, very easily miss in the context of the church. And I talk to people all the time, and I'm like, what do you want to do with your life? And it's like, Carson, I just want to make a difference. And I ask, okay, well, what are you doing that's different than the culture? Or what are you doing that's different than the norm? Well, I'm going to school. Okay, that's good. That's going to help you make a difference, absolutely. But what way are you living? And what things are you taking hold of? And what conversations are you having that are different? And the thing that I think we've got to understand, if we're gonna be a generation that bends the culture, if we're gonna be a generation that sets a new course forward for church and for faith in a world where faith and church is attacked every single day, if we are going to make a difference, we have got to be different, which is why a couple of weeks ago, we defined the church like this. The church is a people united by and living in the way of Jesus. If you weren't here a couple weeks ago, I encourage you to go back and look at that because we explained it in a couple different contexts over the course of those couple of weeks. But the church, you and me attending here and being a part of the movement of Overflow and the movement of Port City, we are designed from the very beginning, Jesus is the founder, by the way, to be a people united by and living in the way of Jesus, which means that I think we've got to take a hard look at what our purpose is and how we live out the purpose that we have in the world that we live in every area of life, especially the most divisive area of our world today, politics. So Paul, in his letter to the church in Philippi, said a couple things that I believe to be so helpful to kind of laying the foundation for where we're going tonight. Philippians chapter 2, verse 13, he's writing to them and he says this. He says, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." It is God who is propelling the movement of the church. It is God who should be the source of every Jesus follower in the world to fulfill his good purpose. And I know from a lot of my conversations with many of you, the idea of purpose is a really, really challenging one, because to believe that you have intrinsic value and really genuine purpose in your life is incredibly complicated, especially when things get hard, or especially when somebody comes and kind of starts attacking you and kind of chipping away at what your life might be, or someone that just simply doubts you. And if you've got any doubt or reservation about what your purpose is in life. I think this verse is incredibly, incredibly important because Paul is saying, no, remember, it's God's purpose that fuels his kingdom. So I just want you to know this, and this isn't really related to the talk, but I felt led to talk about it tonight. It's because God has a good purpose that you can rest assured that you have a purpose and it is good. Because God has a good purpose, you have a purpose, and it is good. Now, you've got to take hold of that. You've got to be different. You've got to walk in the way of Jesus no matter what it costs you. He goes on, and he says this in verse 14. Do everything, everything, without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. What a perfect description of what our world often feels like today. It's warped and it's crooked and everybody seems like they are in it for themselves. But he says, if we do everything without grumbling and we do everything without arguing, we will become children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And then he says, it's then that you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. That's the dream. That's when we make a difference. Because of the way that we communicate with other people, because of the way that we conduct our political activity. So, are we going to take Paul seriously? Are we going to take the step that's required of us laying our life down so that we can pick it back up again in the way of Jesus? When it comes to politics, everything seems to be about winning in our world today. So the title of the message tonight is this, is a new way to win. I believe there's a new way for all of us to win politically that is fundamentally different than anything people are saying on the news or likely even social media. A couple of years ago, my father-in-law got invited to attend the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C., and I've always been a political nerd ever since. I was in kindergarten. I thought that I was running for president. I don't think I am because I like my current gig, but don't quote me on that. I might do it one day, who knows? But I've always been fascinated by politics. I've always been fascinated by the government. I was a government science major. If you don't know this, I studied national security and homeland security, and now I teach people about the Bible. So I went to the National Prayer Breakfast because it was an incredible honor to be invited to sit in there. Now, I wasn't invited. My father-in-law was, and then he could bring one person. So I would say that I'm invited, but I don't know that I was invited. But anyway, we went, and it was during the presidency of Donald Trump, and it was actually the day after that Congress acquitted Donald Trump of the things that were brought forward against him. So as you might imagine, the room was a very, very interesting feeling that day. Even going and participating, it was a challenge in a lot of ways. There was a lot of different thoughts. There was a lot of different feelings that kind of greeted me at the door as I went through the Secret Service protection, and I walked down to the left and then walked back down to the right and found my seat. We were not seated together. I had to sit at a separate table. So I made like 7 new friends. A congressman from Colorado was sitting there. We had a really cool conversation. I felt like something. I was like, man, this is really, really interesting. But then over the next hour and a half, the 3,000 faith leaders, or the 3,000 congresswomen and men who were in the room, supposed to be having a national day of prayer in the name of Jesus for our country, turned into who can talk the worst about the other party. Our faith, our religion, the Jesus movement in the world, sat there, and there's 3,000 people. And they were on both sides of the political aisle. And if you are sitting here doing the math, trying to figure out where I am politically, give that up. We're not talking about that. I have political opinions, but that is not the point of this conversation. The point is, as I'm sitting there, watching this unfold, I felt burdened. I felt, honestly, a little bit embarrassed for the church. Because we weren't shining like stars in that moment. We weren't different. We were just acting the way that the world does because the priority of the room was to win. And if you're trying to think, I'm just talking about Donald Trump, I'm not just talking about Donald Trump. There was congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle that did the same exact thing, to which kind of presented this idea that if we're gonna exist politically inside the context of the church, it feels like it's gotta be us versus them. Those of us in the church versus everybody on the outside of the church. And in 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about this, and he actually gives the opposite view. He's like, who am I to judge those on the outside of the church? I'm to judge those who are the inside of the church, helping them walk in the way of Jesus. But nonetheless, in this room, there's so much division. And as I reflect on that day and as I think about that day, there are a lot of incredible memories where I was in our nation's capital and I learned so much and I met so many incredible people. But could we be different? Could our approach be different? When you turn on the news and you hear people just yelling at each other and painting each other to be the most evil of the evil, could we function differently? And here's the way that I would say this, is when the basis of our political expression is us versus them, we have taken our cue from the world and walked away from the gentle and humble nature of Jesus. We've got to remember that Jesus in Matthew 11 said, I'm gentle and humble at heart. He's giving that to us too. Is he saying don't have an opinion? No, but he's saying take your opinion and operate with it, being gentle, being humble. James chapter 4, humble yourself and the Lord will lift you up. So how do we continue to navigate that? What tools, what way do we continue to take steps forward? I think Peter gives us a really, really interesting picture of how distinct, how different the church is made to be. In 1 Peter chapter 2, he's writing to a group probably in Asia Minor that has been persecuted time and time again, and there's division and there's things being said, and he writes to them and gives them a really, really clear declaration of the way that they are to conduct themselves amidst disagreement. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 1, he says, therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation. Now that you have tasted that the Lord is good, because his purpose is good. And as you come to him, the living stone, talking about Jesus, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built, this is such a beautiful vision for the church, are being built into a spiritual house, a spiritual gathering, a spiritual ecclesia from a couple of weeks ago, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. And if you skip down a few verses to verse 9, he really brings it home and makes it very, very clear when he says this, but you, talking to that group of people, and by talking to that group of people, we get to take this on for ourselves as well. We are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. A chosen people, a royal priesthood, a distinct people, a people who when we see division, when we see dysfunction, we operate differently because we are following someone different. And here's the danger. People lose when the church becomes politicized. Every single time the church becomes solely about politics, people lose. And here's why. Because when we make our existence about anything other than the purpose of Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, we make it harder for people to see the love and the hope and the way of Jesus. Which is why this is so critically important to understand. And it's really made really clear in a conversation between Jesus and Pilate, where he's starting to talk about, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. And then Pilate says, you are a king. And Jesus said, you say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me, and that's in John chapter 18, if you wanted to connect with that a little bit later. Jesus, it made us to be a part of his kingdom. So we'll say it this way. Jesus didn't come to start a political movement. He came to start a kingdom. He came to institute, to install, to erect a kingdom, a people that function differently for the sake of the world. Now how did he do that? And when you look at the stories of Jesus, and I've heard that there's 4 gospels, like dressed up tonight. Come on. There's 3 of you. Oh, okay, cool. You did good. All right, so in Matthew, when he calls Matthew to follow him, he uses 2 words. Follow me. That's how he started building his kingdom. Follow me. Not, if you believe the right things, you can follow me. I'm gonna teach you the right things as you follow me. But there wasn't a condition. There was like, just come with me, and come and see is another way that it's described in the way that Jesus invited people to his table and to be a part of his movement. Follow me. To the point that got Jesus into a lot of trouble because people started to ask him in Matthew chapter 9, we're like, Jesus, why do you eat at the table of sinners and tax collectors? And he kind of gives this analogy that the healthy don't need a doctor, but the sick do. So I'm going to the sick. I'm going to the people who disagree with me, and I'm telling them, and I'm looking them in the eye, you have what it takes, just follow me. What if that was our approach? So the question becomes, what do our actions, what do our words, what do our reactions, or who do our reactions suggest that we follow? By the way that you react and respond to disagreement or to tension in your life, what does that say about who you follow? Are you following your own pursuit of success, or are you following Jesus? So I'm not trying to just be too up in your face tonight, but seriously, but when you react, you reveal your value system. When I react to Lennon being upset and I get really, really frustrated, I reveal that my highest value in that moment is my comfort, not caring for my daughter. So the thing that we've all got to begin to understand when it comes to our political opinion, like we can take that and set it on the side, but how do we react to people who have a different opinion than us? Because that is actually what reveals who we're ultimately following. Because unity is so critically important to God's kingdom that Jesus prayed specifically for it. He prayed to God, asking him to help us be one, for us to be whole, so that people would see God's love alive and moving in the world. Jesus prayed for our unity for the sake of the world. Because when we are unified, amid disagreement, and I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but when we choose unity, we are functioning differently than any other pocket of society. Because every other pocket of society would much rather distance themselves, is to pick the pipe back up, to say, you stay over there because I believe this. So no matter where you are, unity is part of your responsibility. Unity is part of your calling. Because I love, Andy Stanley has helped me so much in the way that I understand this subject, in the way that I have learned it over the past several years. And he says several different things that kind of correlate to this, and this is kind of my paraphrase of it. This is the way that I've taken it and applied it to my life, is that disagreement is inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. Disagreement in your friendships, disagreement politically, it is inevitable. But disunity is always a choice. Disagreement is inevitable. Disunity is always, 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 always a choice. Now, are there things that are different about the way of Jesus? Of course there are. Are there values that the church should take hold of and believe and help people understand? Absolutely. Should the church not have opinions about the hard things in life? Absolutely not. That is not what I'm suggesting. But the way that we go about it, it matters, because we've got to remember, and I would say this about your roommate, about your family, about anybody in your life, this is true. No matter how much you love your new girlfriend or boyfriend, you're going to disagree with them at some point. I've been married for 5 years. We've had plenty of disagreements, and they were all my fault, in case you were curious. But and I mean that. Disagreement It is inevitable for Maddie and I. But what we've begun to understand is this, is that we've got to be unified because we love each other more than our opinions. This is the calling of the church. But the truth can feel divisive. And when the rubber meets the road and you begin to get clear about what the church is here to do and the way that the church is to function and the way of Jesus and the attributes of Jesus that we should all begin applying is the truth can feel divisive, which makes our tone, our posture, and our follow-through incredibly important. Because as we disagree with someone, they are hearing, are they valued in our tone? They're sensing whether or not we're gonna follow through with them by our posture. And then they get to see whether or not we believe what we say that we believe by the way that we follow through. So another way to say that would be the truth will be divisive. It will be. But our tone and our posture and our follow through complete the story. Because we've got to be a light. We've got a difference to make by being different. So how do we deal with people that we feel like are disagreeing? This is especially to the Jesus follower in the room that says, okay, but how do I deal? How do I interact with that person that fundamentally disagrees with principles and ideology that's taught in the Bible? So glad that you asked. Paul says this in Galatians. He says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person. Restore, implying that there is something that's painstaking, that's hard, and that's difficult that they are going through. Our job is to restore that person gently. But he says, watch yourselves, or as you also may be tempted, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. He goes on to say this, if anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions, and then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. So how we talk about other people, how we interact with people that we disagree with is critically important because of this. How we talk about and treat them, the people that we disagree with, or the people that we feel like are on the outside of God's kingdom, on the outside of God's church, or on the other side of the political aisle as us, that reveals the depth of our trust and the one that we say made them in the first place. We are so quick to criticize God's creation, the other 7 billion people on the planet. We're so quick, and we forget the words of Paul. No, they need restoration. They need the truth, yes. But they need a tone and a posture and a follow through that says, you matter because God has a good purpose, so do you. If not us, then who? Seriously, like if we don't do this, if we don't practice this, then who is going to bring the people that feel left behind in culture along with them? Who's going to do it? The people that are out to win or to recruit money or to recruit people solely? Or the people who say, no, like we have an example as to how to do this. But the way that we interact with the people that disagree with us, that are coming after us, it's so much easier to make an exemption for them. When they disagree with our faith or they disagree with our policy, we have permission to dislike them, to treat them poorly, to kind of push them out of our life. Well, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, would suggest something entirely different. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. In other words, that follow in your Father in heaven's footsteps by the way that you live. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, What reward will you get? What's going to happen in your life? What's going to be different in your life? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And I think this is so interesting because Matthew was a tax collector and he's the one writing all this down. And I think he's making some really, really important connections that might kind of hurt him a little bit on the inside of the way that Jesus talked about this, because Jesus wasn't saving any punches. He was going, no, you can't just love the people that agree with you. You can't just love the people that you get along with. Because tax collectors in that time did not have a great reputation as example Christians or example people that loved and followed God or followed Torah. So, who are you loving right now that disagrees with you? Who's in your recent texts that drives you crazy where you added value to them? Who have you gone out of your way that you know that you disagree with them on things? But who have you gone to love? Who have you gone to care for that you just simply don't understand? The Jesus calling, the Jesus purpose is to say, I'm getting in it with people whether I agree with them or not, because the truth matters. Even when it comes to interacting with somebody that is so different than us. When the church takes on the distinctness of Jesus, people win every time. When we, as God's ecclesia, his gathering, his movement in the world, take on his distinctness, his way of ministry, his values, when we react in the same way that Jesus reacted, people win. Because they're valued enough not to leave them where they are. And when they have a different political opinion than us, they know that our love isn't circumstantial. Though we disagree, though we voted for someone else, we're not gonna just take the rhetoric and we're not just gonna take the narrative. We're not just gonna form our own agenda, trying to paint the person that we disagree with in the worst possible light that we could. I follow so many people who on both sides of the aisle demonize the other party, demonize the other way of thinking every day. And they say, the one post will be, God is love, and God wants to care for us. And for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And then the next post is, this person is fill in the blank. What does that say about what we believe? What if the question that the world was asking about God and faith wasn't about whether or not God existed to them, but whether or not we actually believed God is who he says that he is? Because the news and the reality of Jesus is not foreign to the world. Jesus is known and widely accepted as a really, really good and caring person. So, do your friends know? Do the people that disagree with you, do they see something different in you that's paving the way to a different world and to a different church? A church that says we're gonna stand in the middle, we're gonna love people on both sides of the political aisle because we are united by our Lord and by our Savior, Jesus. Jesus really, really did do so many things that kind of took our world and flipped it upside down. And I love this because Jesus demonstrated how we should conduct ourselves or how we should act politically with a bucket of water. He really, really did. He changed everything about the way that we should interact with the people that we disagree with, the people that we have the most issue with a bucket of water. And John chapter 13, one of my favorite chapters in all of the Bible for several different reasons, but this story is certainly one of them. It's the story of him washing his disciples' feet. And he gets up and he takes his outer coat off and pours water into a bucket, and he goes and sits at their feet and begins washing their feet. When he gets to Peter, Peter takes really big issue with that and starts kind of staring like, Jesus, like, no, like I should be washing your feet. And, Jesus says, no, like you need to be washed. But those, who are clean, like they don't need a full bath or a full shower. They just need their feet clean. But there are some people in the room, Jesus alludes to, that are not clean. And the part of that story that's so interesting is because Jesus is recognizing that a guy named Judas was in the room. The guy who would go on to betray Jesus and cost Jesus his life. Ultimate disagreement, ultimate selfishness, ultimate betrayal. What did Jesus do? He washed his feet. He sat on the floor, he looked him in the eye, and he washed his feet. And that, if I were to wash one of y'all's feet, which I certainly thought about it, but I didn't want to make it about the analogy. But if I washed one of y'all's feet, it would stink and we would get over it. But think about in a world without closed-toed shoes. Think about sandals and sand and mud. Think about the things that were probably on someone's foot without the modern amenities that we enjoy every day. This was an act of service. This was different, especially for someone who identified as a leader or as a caretaker or as a king of a new kingdom. Think about how radical that was. Jesus sitting on the floor saying, Judas, I'm actually washing your feet. And some of you would say, if I serve someone that I disagree with, if I kind of get down in front of them and make myself their servant amid me disagreeing with their opinion on fill in the blank, I'm surrendering my convictions because I'm getting close to them. And someone might think that I agree with them, or someone might kind of get the wrong idea. And the thing that I think Jesus does in that picture of washing people's feet, other people besides Jews that would go on to do some kind of messed up things, Peter being one of them, would deny Jesus 3 times. What does that mean about Jesus' conviction? What does that mean about the thing that Jesus believed in most? And is that Jesus didn't lose his conviction by washing his disciples' feet or washing the feet of sinners. He revealed it. It's sitting on the floor and loving someone that he disagreed with, or loving someone that was going to betray him, and loving people on the other side of the aisle of nearly probably every issue. People had the idea that all of Jesus' disciples were just totally on board with all things in God's kingdom. They were not. They were nothing like Jesus. And he's sitting on the floor, washing their feet. Because his conviction wasn't just about being right, it was about doing the way of his Father's kingdom. It was about constructing a movement in the world that would help other people see the love of God. Because he knew this: love is more pervasive than political policy. It is. Love is going to do more in this world than just a mere political opinion, or just appearing right, or just sitting on the right side of the aisle to where people kind of think the right thing of you. Love is more pervasive than anything else the world has to offer. Study the way of Jesus. Study what Jesus did. Because the story continues on later down, and it says when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher, and you call me Lord, and rightly so. For this is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. So the question becomes, are we going to be the generation? Are we going to be the people that says enough? That says, yeah, we disagree on things, but we're gonna choose to be unified around the person of Jesus. We're not gonna just take everybody on the opposite side of the political aisle as us and just lump them into this big basket and treat them one way. We're gonna walk with them. We're gonna be friends with them. We're gonna wash their feet because it's what our teacher and it's what our Lord said to do. I have a list of questions for all of us to consider. What if the church was known for the way that it served before it was known for its opinions? What would be different? What would be different about the way that we saw faith in the world today, or the way that the world saw faith or church? What if they saw the church's actions in our community before they knew our opinions? What if you were known for the activity of your faith more than your perfect memorization of theology? What if your friends, what if your campus, what if Cape Fear, and what if UNCW and Brunswick Community College? What if your schools, the people that you interacted with, knew more about the activity of your servanthood than your perfect ability to wield theology? What if you allowed your faith to make you uncomfortable with the people that you interacted with, at the feet that you washed? What if we as a generation didn't succumb to the tragedy that cancel culture is and just love people unconditionally? What would be different? It would cost us some things. But how much farther do you think the message of Jesus might go if we stood in the dark as a light of Jesus? What if when people looked at us and heard how we talk, it reminded them of Jesus? Or if it pointed them to Jesus? What if we voted and participated politically with humility? What would be different about the way that the people saw politics in the church? Would a conversation like tonight feel a little bit different if humility was the center point of our political existence? The final question is this, is what if Jesus was actually our ultimate teacher, like really, really in our life? What if he was actually our teacher and our Lord? What if we took our cues only from him in the way that we operated and lived our life? What would be different? What would be different about the church? Here's my argument, and here's my assessment, is that we would be a movement like no other. We would stand out, not as perfect people, not as people that have it all figured out, but as followers of Jesus, of people that say, our lordship is Jesus. The person we believe is our ultimate authority and our ultimate teacher, and the end all be all is the Galilean day laborer who gave his life for me and for you. The leader and the king that wasn't afraid to sit on the ground, pour a bucket of water, and wash people's feet that he disagreed with. A movement like no other. Hear me clearly. That is your calling. That is what you are made to be a part of as a Jesus follower in our world. Don't miss it. And don't get caught up in the narrative of the world, because God has a new story. God has a good purpose for you. And it starts with you choosing to be the different of Jesus. God, we thank you. We thank you for your example, and we thank you for your kingdom. We thank you for your promises and your instructions and just the way that you have invited us to live in a divided and complex world. God, thank you for showing us a different way. God, we pray tonight and we ask that we would be a generation that steps into our calling of bringing your good purpose to the world. God, I pray that we would be focused on that we wouldn't get distracted by disagreement or tension, that we would see the person on the other side of the political disagreement or the political tension. God, I pray for the person in the room right now or watching online that they disagree politically with their family and they don't know what to do about it, and they don't know how to live at peace with their family when they go home. God, I pray that you would just fill them up with the resolve and the courage to wash their family's feet as you did, and to remember that your conviction, your core belief was secure in that moment. Your plan didn't change. You didn't deviate course. God, I pray that you would remind us of that. God, I pray as people challenge us and disagree with us, that we would have a sense of self-control and patience and love for them that's so strong and it's so good that we look back at it and know that it could have only come from you. God, we love you. We say this in your name.